I think right now would be a perfect time to share that this podcast is officially sponsored. And this week's episode is brought to you by Juliana Barbati Consulting. Juliana is an expert in podcast SEO. She's worked with so many different podcasts and helped shows grow, helped shows get more eyes, helped shows get more ears, helped shows, get more followers. And I am honored to be working with her and have her team backing the podcast. So I'm very excited that they are the first advertiser to join the Round 2 podcast, first of many. So thank you, Juliana. And if you are looking for any sort of services to help your podcast grow, feel free to reach out to her. Her contact information is in the show notes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round 2 podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I am so excited to be with you today. My guest is somebody that I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. I found her on TikTok, and I thought she had the coolest energy, the coolest vibe. So I found her email, sent her a note, and said, I'd love it if you would be on my podcast. So Kelly, welcome to the Round 2 podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Glad you reached out.
Yes, me too. Me too. Thank you for accepting my, invitation to come chat. So, like I mentioned, I found you on TikTok and, aside from your energy, I just loved one of your hashtags that you use, which was like old broad wisdom, which I don't think that you look like a broad, nor do I think that you look old. So how did you end up there?
I have to say some people don't love that. Okay. But, I mean, it's not to be taken too seriously.
Of course.
Hopefully just by the phrase, it's not to be taken too seriously. But so I think that's part of the reason that I chose it is that in general in life, as I've aged and weathered storms, I just don't take myself quite as seriously or life quite as seriously. There are very few things in life that we need to take seriously. And I think sometimes there's a heaviness. There's a heaviness about and a lot of things I talk about, which are lifestyle issues around beauty and aging and fitness. We just inject a whole lot of heaviness into a lot of topics that really don't warrant it. And so, that was kind of the birth of my hashtag.
I love it. And I also think that it is somewhat disruptive. So I think that that's always a good thing for engagement, right?
Yeah, it gets people's engines revving, and I like that.
Yeah, of course, of course. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
It's always like you're running around right until the end. And so now I'm just sitting here, letting my shoulders fall and going to enjoy talking to you.
Awesome. Well, I love that. So as you know, my podcast is called Round 2, and it is very focused on people who have had major life changes, whether they are intentional or unintentional. So one of the things that grabbed me about you is that you are definitely a survivor. And I thought that your story would be just a really beautiful one to tell about everything that you've been through. So I don't even know where you want to start, but I invite you to start wherever feels comfortable.
Sure. I mean, I think we're all survivors. I don't even think you hit adulthood without being a survivor, And I think you're probably referring to my most recent major trauma struggle, which was the death of my husband about 1.5 years ago. For all we knew, he was a healthy guy. And he just basically died from a sudden and powerful heart attack. So no warning. And these things in life, they just end up completely changing what you had expected. But I would say, so in that sense, it's like, okay, this is round 2, a new life that I hadn't banked on. But I will say that I have experienced other things like that in my life, where I think as a young person who my childhood had some bumps in it. And so my plan then was to control the absolute crap out of the rest of my life. And, I became an accountant, the most stable job ever. I married my high school sweetheart, who was the most stable man on the planet. And I was just going to engineer my life so that it would be completely predictable. And then life happened. Right?
Yeah.
And so I learned, at about 30 for me, I realized, oh, okay, well, trying to control the crap out of life doesn't work. And sometimes what we think we need and want isn't what we actually need and want. And so
Definitely.
that sort of like now almost 25 years ago was the beginning of my reprogramming to say, like, if you imagine that you have one path that you're walking in life, life will teach you otherwise. Like, I mean, you're walking a path, I mean, by definition, but you can't see it, you know? And so I actually think that some of those other big changes that I had made, and this isn't to diminish how much I miss Dave and how very, very sad it is to lose your person and for my girls to lose their dad, but really understanding that you can't predict life, and having weathered other big changes in my life has helped me navigate this new big terrible change.
Yeah. So what was it when you were in your 30s that made you recognize that you were not able to control your life the way you had attempted to?
And this is not meant in any way to be disparaging for my first husband, who was a lovely man. But for me, I got to the point where that relationship, or me in that relationship, was not what I wanted to continue. Yeah. And I mean, intellectually, I wanted to continue it. And I think that's the thing with control. It's an intellectual attempt.
Yeah.
But your body and spirit like often have other plans
Totally.
if you're not in alignment, right?
So true.
And so the first massive shift in my life was my divorce from my high school sweetheart. And even though that was a choice that I made, it wasn't a choice that I made from a calm and mindful place. It was from a place of my spirit saying to my mind, I get that you've been in charge and you've made good decisions, but I am not fulfilled, so we're going to blow it all up. So that was the first real experience with maybe this control business doesn't work.
You know, it's so funny having only, spoken with you one time prior to this and not knowing this part of your story. I can relate to you so much. Right. I like to say that I'm a recovering control freak and very similar with my own marriage. It was one of those things where my mind wanted to make it work, but everything else in me just, it wasn't there. And I say the same thing. Like, I certainly don't want to like slight him or anything negative. And I mean, he's a wonderful man. He just isn't the wonderful man for me.
Right. And
it's a tough situation to be in and to make that decision. So I can totally understand where you were.
And like, I think too, I mean, just to focus in on that choice, I also reflect now with decades past that divorce, and I don't have regrets in life, because you have no idea what you're wishing away if you make regrets.
Totally.
Or if you regret or wish that you had done something differently, right? It's just like a wasted exercise. But I also think that decision had far more to do with me than it had to do with him or the relationship.
100%.
But I wouldn't be the person that I am now if I hadn't moved through that. And so I guess the regret that I feel around that is just that the kind of collateral damage of hurting other people in the journey that I was taking to continue to evolve. I would never wish for that. I try and remind myself, like, we were all grown adults, but we almost weren't, right? In my case, we were like kids. So
no, I've said those same words. Like, I don't live with regret. There's no point in playing. I call it the what if game. What if I would have done this or said that or been here, there, the other. But the only thing that I hate the most about that choice was hurting him. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's I try and remind myself, it's a little bit egomaniacal for me to say, oh, I ruined his life by making it. No, I freed him to pursue another path too. And I think for myself, empathizing and putting myself in his shoes, I only want to be with people who are choosing me with every fiber of their being. I would never want to put someone through, I would never want to go through being something that was preventing someone from evolving, or that they were like doing it because they thought they should. I mean, that is just, no, that's my idea of hell.
Totally, totally, 100%. So after you made that choice and got through that time period of life, what came next?
Well, so I remarried Dave. I was a partner in a local accounting firm at the time, but Dave had a home base in another city and he had kids from his first marriage. So he couldn't relocate. So I left my partnership where I envisioned I would be for the rest of my career.
Wow.
I left my city, which is on the west coast of North America and very mild and beautiful, and moved to like into the actual winter of Canada
Oh,
for the first time. I thought minus 30, I'm just going to like literally drop dead, but it's a
right?
dry cold.
Oh my
You
gosh.
can dress
Okay.
for it.
Okay. My brain does not physically compute
Right?
numbers that are that negative. I'm just like, what does it look like out there?
Right?
Like, how do
Yeah,
you breathe when you go outside? You
exactly.
know?
These are reasonable. You have to plug your car in so it will start, like
Yeah.
I had two girls, just to pass over. I had two girls when I lived there. And, I was volunteering in their school. And they were like, this is my older daughter, but she was tiny. I think it was grade 1. And there's a fire drill. And they do these freaking fire drills when it's like minus 30 dead of winter. And we're all standing outside without coats. And I was just like, is there any other coastal people here? This is not right. Let's burn in the fire.
Right?
In the face
I mean, can you even have skin showing in temperatures like
it's
that?
amazing what the human body can endure with the right gear. It took me a few years to get the right gear, but it is different when it's a dry cold. You hear that from people who are defending living in these uninhabitable places. But so, I mean, so this was huge change in my life. I moved through divorce. I got remarried. I left my firm. I left my city and my family and friends.
Wow.
I became a stepmom and got pregnant. And
oh my gosh.
Like for the first time in my life, well, no, for the first time since I was 14 years old, I wasn't working. And I was in a new city in the dead of winter, pregnant. So that was huge change, but it was infused with a lot of optimism. Whereas like divorce is not. Okay, divorce is hard. And Dave's death, of course, is absolutely not. It was horrible, absolutely traumatic and horrible. But that time in my life where there was so much change, was infused with joy, like joy of, sorry.
It's okay.
Being, and again, hopefully my first husband doesn't see this. I'm sure he doesn't follow my movements anymore, but joy of being in a relationship that I never, ever questioned.
That's
like
beautiful.
Even when I was frustrated or whatever, like, oh, we're all human, but I never, ever wondered if I was where I was supposed to be. And I cannot tell you after like a long time of my spirit saying, are we where we're supposed to be? Like that feeling is just, I've been in pursuit of it and had it for most of my life since then. And sometimes you can feel yourself getting off track, but that was one of the biggest gifts of my life to realize, like when I'm in alignment, my spirit is quiet. How magical.
That is so beautiful. Right? What a beautiful thing to say and to feel and to acknowledge.
I mean, it was just like, it doesn't have to mean your life is just going perfectly and swimmingly. It just means you're certain you're exactly where you're supposed to be, right? And then I was like pregnant and a new mom. And so there was just so much joy at that time in my life. It made coping with an overdose of change, I will say. I mean, I'm an accountant, okay? Like that was too much change. But it kind of like eased the change.
Well, I was going to say to have that level of self-awareness when you had literally everything in your life, a complete 180, I think is really just like almost just, it really speaks to your character and the work that you had done to get to know yourself on those levels and understand, and I guess maybe finally listen to what your body and soul were saying to you to get to that point where you were really choosing you and choosing to walk in alignment with who you are at your core. So then you could make all these massive changes and be aware enough to acknowledge the joy in all of it, despite all of the newness.
Some of this clarity has been earned like subsequently. Like it's because I'm looking back with clarity. But what I did know in the moment was this peace. And maybe I wouldn't have articulated it the way I know it to be true now. But I think it was the beginning of this sort of like permanent shift in my life. When I think of this idea of round two, or like, when did my life dramatically change? It was when I decided to, or like, I didn't even decide, because that implies that it's an intellectual or a mind choice. But when I became mind, body, and spirit, or acknowledged that I was, or like actually became more integrated instead of just trying to be like a brain on a popsicle stick. And that happened in when I was around 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny with all of the different things that people and the smart scientists and people who study the human brain and who all these things that they've learned over time, right? And how like our brains aren't fully developed until we're 26. And, you know, it makes me look back on my life and some of the things that I thought were going to be true when I was 22 and 23. And I'm like, I was a child. Like, what was I, you know, what was I thinking? Like, I wasn't, because I wasn't completely fully developed yet.
Yeah.
So
I think
it makes sense.
Because I post on TikTok. So I've had this great good fortune of being in contact with a broader array of people than I would just like in the
just
real
living
world, right?
Yeah.
And so I interact more with young people beyond just, you know, my girls and their friends. And this notion of being behind feels like such an epidemic. And I don't know if that's new, or we're just more in touch with the narrative than we were when I was growing up. But I think part of it is now through technology, we have this window into so many people's lives. Like when I was growing up, I could not literally, even if I wanted to, compare myself to the masses, because I had no idea what the masses were doing.
Right.
So the only people I was comparing myself against were like people that lived down the street. You know, they weren't really. So if they were a bit ahead of me, I mean, so this was not really part of that kind of developing narrative for young adults, for teenagers. And now we have this blessing and curse of being more connected on a wide scale. And then the combination of people kind of putting their best foot forward, like we're sharing all of our successes, but not necessarily our failures. And so I hear a lot about this feeling of being behind from younger people. And to me, these cataclysmic changes in my life have helped me really know in my bones that you cannot be behind, because it's not a straight line. It's impossible to be behind.
It totally is. And we all are on our own journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of like going back to the topic of regrets, right? It's like, you can't have those regrets, because if you were regretting something from the past, you wouldn't be who you are in the present.
Yeah.
And if you love who you are in the present, then you have to just accept your journey.
Yeah. And even if like maybe you don't love yourself, right? Like when I look at the crap choices that I've made, I'm like, ooh, I really don't like that. I don't like that I had the capacity to do that. I would change that if I could. But I have had this sort of really, what I think I've known in my spirit, but it's become really a conscious conviction, is that everything that happens in your life can serve you, can have meaning, if you choose to believe that. Like by believing that, it makes it true. And I did a post on TikTok recently saying I had told a friend that I get everything I want, and they were like, "Oh, holy crap, that's super douchey, right?" And I was like, "Wait, that's not right." Like it made me stop and be like, "Well, no, like I've had lots of hard times in my life, hard things." And what I realized is I want everything I get. And this really bringing that into my conscious mind has just in like the last month shifted me a little bit when I reflect on what I would say my failings.
Okay. Yeah.
Because maybe if I can't even see the purpose of them, I
Mm-hmm.
believe that they have purpose.
I love that. Okay, this is crazy. So I told you when we first jumped on, I'm down here in Mexico, and not yesterday, but the day before, I did what's called a Temazcal ceremony, and it's basically like a sweat lodge, right? So it's this dome, and there's a guide, and I feel incredibly fortunate that I was going through the ceremony by myself. There weren't other people, so I wasn't in there kind of interacting with strangers' energies. It was just mine and his as he was guiding me through the ceremony. And it was broken into like 4 different rounds. And so each one, when he would completely close off the dome, so it would get very, very hot and steamy, and there was herbs and it smelled amazing. And each round had a specific focus. The third focus was like the warrior within. And so there was a lot of breathing, and then we were yelling and exhaling really loudly. It was very, very cool. And afterwards, he would talk a little bit and like tell stories and about like the history of the ceremony and like maybe how I would be feeling afterwards. But he spoke a lot about his grandmother and how she was just this incredibly wise woman. And one of the things that she had talked about was sins. And so what you just said made me think about that, because she wasn't talking about sitting there and saying like, oh, forgive me for my sins, forgive me for doing these things. She was saying that like the true sin in life is not living authentically to who you actually are. And I was like, whoa, like that is such a
Amen.
perspective.
Yeah.
And so when you just said that, I was like, wait a minute, how are we having
Right?
this conversation like
I
2
got
days later?
goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I
So,
think too that I feel like, authenticity, it's a bit like of a buzzword. And so we've lost maybe our real connection with it. But what I think it does is it frees other people to do the same, right? So when you have the courage, even if they don't really even understand why you're having an impact on them, I think that it actually creates an opportunity for intimacy that you can never ever have,
yeah.
like in a personal relationship or collectively, if you aren't real, because
Yeah.
then it's just a whole bunch of us walking around behaving like me puppets, I call it, right? Like, like you're
Yeah.
interacting with this fake person. I have this little imaginary puppet.
Yeah. Well,
And so like you feel the disconnect from me because you're like, this doesn't feel quite right. And if you like the me puppet, it does nothing for me because it's not
right.
me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the other thing that posting on TikTok has shown me is kind of like epidemic of loneliness,
Oh, 1000%.
right?
And it's
And
so sad.
it's heartbreaking. And like if it seems weird for some people if you say like I feel connected to the people who follow me, but I do.
Yeah.
And I can tell that they also feel connected to me. I believe that flows from me being authentic. But I really also think that this epidemic of loneliness is connected with a lack of authenticity.
I could not agree more. And it's so tough because, so many people talk about social media and like social media is fake and it's a highlight reel and it's all these things. And I mean, I know I'm guilty of that. Like, I don't want to post a photo where I think I look ugly or I don't like my outfit or my smile is awkward or whatever it may be. But it's also like people want people like what you've been doing to come on and like share the shit, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
Like these are the tough things that I've been going through because people want to feel that like, oh my God, me too. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like you said that in a way. I mean, even when we first started talking, you were talking about your divorce. I was like, oh my God, you said the words that I've said multiple times.
Right.
And I love that. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel so connected to you.
Right. And then the loneliness eases. The judgment of self eases. Like, oh, I wasn't the only asshole that left a nice guy.
Yeah, totally.
I can say that because we both did.
Oh, no, 100%. You totally can. Oh my God. Free for all. Of course. It is so true though.
Like there are different layers about publishing. You're doing it here on this podcast. And people do it on social media. Whereas, rewinding, it used to be done mainly through books. But there's the thread through no matter the form that publishing takes or content creation takes, when we are honest and willing to like let our truth be heard, it has a powerful impact on people.
It does, because nobody is perfect. Nobody's life is picture perfect and colored right and looked right and, perfectly filtered and all the right lighting and all of the, makeup and hair and all the things. I mean, you hear these stories about, these influencers, who have different things or they post different things. And then you find out that they're like, their car got repoed, or like the clothes that they were wearing.
The picture.
Yeah, exactly. We got the photo.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So did you start posting on TikTok because you needed an outlet, or how did you first start rolling over there?
So I had written a book, my first book, or like rewind, maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I had a written blog. I had like 100 subscribers. It was like sweeping the nation. And I blogged weekly for 2 weeks. And then I wrote a book. So I'm a CPA. I had a divorce advisory practice, right, where I helped people divide their shit when they got divorced. Sure. Mainly like ultra high net worth folks where it's complicated, right? But I was also a writer and wanted to help more people. And I had really seen, well, one, that people aren't very well supported through the business aspect of divorce. And also, like anything to do with money, a lot of how we think and feel impacts how we navigate financial issues. And so I just wanted to help. And when I was publishing that book, my publisher said, so how are you going to sell this book? And I was like, I thought that was your job. I didn't realize, like, as an unknown author, you have to sell your book. And I was like, so they were saying, do you have a platform? I'm like, yeah, I have 123 followers on Instagram. And I think one of them might be getting divorced. Like, sales are going to be off So that is why I started posting on TikTok. My stepdaughter had started posting not too long, I think, before me. And she had gained, like, the app at the time, this was 4 years ago, you could really gain a following quite quickly. And so when I started posting, I was posting about fitness. Like, I'm an older woman. I compete in bodybuilding and fitness is a big part of my life. And I thought that would be more interesting to people than divorce. But I was doing it with this kind of idea of building a platform in the back of my head.
Got it. Okay.
But it has become its own thing. I mean, it's not a money. I don't make any money. I've made 33 cents on TikTok, even though I have a decent sized following. There's no creator fund in Canada.
Okay. I've heard that, which is so unfortunate because there are so many phenomenal Canadian creators.
I mean, it's kind of cool. We're doing it just from the goodness of our hearts.
Because you love it. No, it's so true. But when I heard that, I was like, huh? Like some of TikTok's biggest creators are in Canada. That's wild.
I need a sandwich board. Give us the creator fund.
Totally.
So, I would say that posting it's shaped me as much as like I've provided anything to anyone. And so what it became, I posted almost daily for 4 years, which is like sort of mind blowing for me to think, but I would talk about my life. And so then when Dave died, it's very strange when you lose someone very close to you for life to move on, like continue on, right? Because
I can't even imagine.
This was my thought, and I don't know if this is a common feeling for survivors, but and I think it was subconscious at first, but upon reflection, this is how I felt. If I move forward, change the sheets, go grocery shopping, get my nails done, post on TikTok, I am condoning that he died. Like I'm accepting it. I'm giving it my stamp of approval because I'm moving ahead. It's a very strange thing, right? So
it's gotta be.
I had this kind of like, ooh, you're kind of stuck, but life moves on. Like you can. I mean, it's pretty hard to stay stuck. And frankly, I didn't want to. So I started to post and my life was completely consumed by grieving Dave's loss. And so I talked mainly about that. I was glad that I had many years of experience in content creation because what I have found in terms of sharing grief is that so much of it, like the content that's out there, is whitewashed. And I think it's this idea of, well, not wanting to say anything negative about the dead person, of course.
Oh, sure.
But it's deeper than that. It's like we have this, in the same way that I think we're now more free of it, but we have this notion of what a mom should look like.
Oh,
we have a very rigid notion of what a widow should look like. And I would say
Oh,
probably
wow.
even more so than a widower. I don't know why we do that to ourselves as women, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's,
Like you're supposed to just be wear black and be crying every day and
yeah,
like never look at another man.
all that, all that, right?
Perfect.
And that's not the human experience.
No.
So this, coming back to this, the power of authenticity, me saying what was true, like for me, not the details were true for any other widow, but that I was prepared to say things about my experience that were not flattering to me. I think was important and powerful. It was important for me too, because I think when you're trying to embody this ideal as a widow or mom or whatever, business person, whatever it is, you're like shutting off all these aspects of yourself. And like my goal is to integrate all the aspects of myself. So it was really important for me
Yeah.
to talk about it.
So are you comfortable sharing what happened and how, I mean, you said a heart attack, but are you comfortable talking about that day?
Yeah, yeah. I'm writing a memoir, Bad Widow.
Oh,
So
ooh.
the opening,
Another disruptive title. I like it. I like it.
it's going to be me in a bustier or something. No, I don't. On the cover. So it was, I'll just tell you the story of the day and hopefully I
Sure.
could get through it.
Okay.
So Dave and I, like at home, we just had our two girls. His kids were adults and had moved out. And so it was the four of us at home. And Jess, our oldest, who was 17 at the time, she was 18 at the time. Sorry, she turned 18 in the June, and this is August. And we spent the day getting ready for her to go to university. So she and I were flying from Vancouver, which is the west coast of Canada, to Montreal, which is in the east.
Okay.
So a long flight, like 6 hours away. And so we were running errands and getting a pedicure and all the fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was feeling like it was a sad, a beautiful, but kind of melancholy day. My girl's going, my baby. And so I was kind of like a little bit grieving, but I was enjoying the day. And I had to take my car in for service. And so I had asked Dave, hey, babe, can you come pick us up? I got to drop the car off. And that was a phone call midday. No problem. So Jess and I were at our local auto body shop and I was handing the keys over to the mechanic and Sydney called my young one. She was 14 at the time. And I just let the call go to voicemail because I was right in the middle of handing my keys over. And, Jess and I were just chatting and waiting for Dave to come and pick us up. And I'd given him like a 15-minute window. I think this is when we'll be ready. And it was the beginning of that window. And the man was just always, always on time. So I had a little oh, kind of strange. And then I couldn't get a hold of Sid. I kept, I was returning her call and texting like, hey, what do you need, sweetie? And I couldn't get a hold of her. And time passed. Jess and I were just chatting. The 15-minute window ended and Dave still wasn't there. And then I was like, something doesn't feel right here. And I finally got a hold of Sid. So it was 15, 17 minutes later. And she said, Mom, Dad is on the floor, non-responsive. And just a lot is going through your mind and also nothing's going through your mind. Because that is not language she would use. So I knew there are emergency responders at my house. And I just ran back in. My key was still on the counter and I grabbed the key and ran out. And Jess and I got in the car. And it was probably a 15-minute drive home.
Oh, God.
And Jess was amazing and calm. And I didn't think for a minute that he was dead. Like wasn't super we were just focused on, we're going to get home. We're going to stay as calm as possible. And when I arrived, the house was, a crime scene, right? Like there was police and fire truck. My front door was open and Jess stayed in the yard. And I ran inside and grabbed Sid. And I don't remember saying anything. And then a police officer lady came up to me and said that he was dead.
Oh my God.
And, you piece some of that together after the fact. They had already told Sydney. So Sydney had, up until that point, tried to get a hold of me. called 911, and they walked her through trying to revive her dead dad, who's a big man, trying to roll him over. And then they told her to go get a neighbor, thank God. And whatever guided her to make a great choice of a neighbor. And so it was a young woman, and she came and helped sit through that. But before I got there, they had told her that he was dead.
Oh my God.
Which, of course, she knew, but that's heartbreaking.
Of course.
Then I went and saw him. He was covered, like his body was covered, and I didn't uncover it. And I just, it's hard to explain the shock and denial, because when I had heard that before, I'd been in a situation like that, I just thought, like, how do you deny death? It's like the last thing you could deny.
But how do you accept it also?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so it's a strange thing, and I empathize with emergency responders. Because for them also, they're fully aware, like they aren't traumatized, obviously, like they shouldn't be. I mean, maybe a little bit, but and so they're bearing witness to this trauma, and then they also have to do their job. And so they were explaining that I couldn't touch him or be around him because he was what seemed like a healthy man just died, and so it was like a crime scene.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and then it took maybe like a few hours. The day is a bit hazy in my mind, right? But for them to finally take him away. And yeah, that's the beginning of all these small steps towards wrapping your heart and mind around something that's completely incomprehensible. And then, yeah, my girls and I slowly pieced our life back together, but I would say that didn't start for a while.
I mean, I truly can't imagine. And I don't even know. I feel like you just walked me through like a movie. Like I was, because it's just so unimaginable.
Yeah. That morning, like we both worked from home. And so we'd been sitting at the island, our kitchen island. And, we're in this mode of reflecting because our girl was about to go to university, right? And Dave was saying to me, I want to start getting back to more of our weekend trips together. And we were pretty committed to that. And it had kind of fallen off since COVID. I think we got out of the habit. And I said, well, babe, like, it's just going to be the three of us. Like, it's just going to be you and me and Sid for a couple of years. So, like, I don't think that makes a ton of sense. And, like, in 2 years, we're going to just be able to travel all whenever we want together. I think about that conversation, and not that I regret the conversation, but just what I want to take and like encourage everyone to take is just never counting on a future, whether it's death or something else, like to just really, really savor the shit out of your people and your time with them. And I do feel like in the big picture, that is exactly what Dave and I did. Like we really, I didn't take our relationship for granted. We had lots of like difficult times, and maybe that helped us appreciate, what we had. But I mean, the spotlight on certain moments because he died, like you never forget those moments, and they take on way more significance than they ever would have. Like I never would have remembered dropping our car off at the mechanic.
Right.
But now I will never forget.
Yeah. So how did you begin to heal?
It's like interesting, except it's terrible at the same time. But I think you start healing right away. Like immediately I could not eat or sleep. And you're in, like, I don't know, maybe this is a good thing, but when you go through something like this, you are in disaster recovery, especially as a parent. Like you're immediately in disaster recovery. So there's this outlet or distraction, which you can't ignore, the things that must be done. Like people say, oh, don't make big decisions, but death comes along with big decisions that must be made. But after like even a week, I was eating again. And like after a few weeks, I was sleeping again. And I had a lot of like guilt, like, oh, I'm doing this wrong and I shouldn't be able to eat or sleep because that means like I'm a bad widow. And I think you could actively get in the way of your own healing for sure. But the natural way of things is to heal.
Yeah.
I believe.
Do you feel like your body just started doing things and you could fight it or you could just go along with it?
Yeah. And I think like what I had to more actively manage is my mind wanting to step in and say, no, we're not going to heal. Like, because of like guilt, really.
Yeah.
And also the desire to hang on to him.
Yeah.
Like, it's a hard thing to heal because it comes along with, like, at first you're literally thinking about that person every minute of every day, you know, and then you're healing and you're not, or I'm not, I wasn't anymore. And I think that's a common, and so you actually have to choose to allow that to happen. And I think some people don't want to do that, and I wouldn't judge them for that. So there was I had some crossroad moments for sure. I had probably 3 or 4 days, it was quick after he died. We got preliminary autopsy report, and so I knew he had a heart attack. And you know, I live a super healthy lifestyle, and I would encourage him, but I'm not like a hovering kind of person. So it was like, I didn't book his doctor's appointments or like make him eat right, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just had this crushing moment of like, I killed him. I could have saved him, and instead I killed him. It was a turning point for me. I'm like, if I indulge this, like, my life as I know it is over. And I really felt like, even though like I've never had dark thoughts and I love being alive, I thought after my girls are grown, my life force is just, and they don't need me, my life force is just going to seep out of my body. It was just the darker than the day he died. Maybe because I was more aware, right? That was the first day where I made an active choice to change the way I thought, because, and it wasn't because I'm like all enlightened. I was like, I think I'll die if I don't change the way I think about this. And actually that, like, coming to the brink like that, I think it ended up serving me through the course of the last year and a half of grieving him.
Yeah.
Because there were lots of less intense but similar moments of, I've decided to start dating. And so all these things that you do like can be accompanied with thoughts that inflict more suffering on you as a group, someone who's grieving. And I'm getting in the habit of choosing to not indulge those thoughts.
I think that is so beautiful because, you know, I've not been through what you've been through, but I have, you know, read about different people and listened to other people speak about their experiences. And I think one thing that people have said is like, they fear, oh, if I'm not thinking about him all the time, that means I'm forgetting him. And it's like, no, like, that's so not true. You're never going to forget him. And so I think you, by saying all these different things and playing truly an active role in not letting the darkness overtake you and acknowledging that just because I don't think about him 24/7 doesn't mean that he's forgotten. It just means that like I'm a human being who is choosing to continue to live because I'm still here.
You know what the surprising thing has been with me, and this is more recent, and I think it's because I've had an accepting attitude towards however I was grieving. And I for sure that was helped along by me wanting to have an accepting attitude for my girls, like to give them freedom to, we still joke about their dad. We joke about having like, you know, the dead guy and bring him out at Christmas and he sits with us for Christmas, like to still be us, still be the way we were with him when he was alive. Like, but what I have found is this kind of ease that I've found with grief is giving me a current relationship with Dave, like an ease in like talking with them and almost like making, like continuing the relationship as opposed to locking me in to only remembering him, to only being attached to my sorrow around his death. Like enabling myself to loosen the grip on that means I get to have him now. Like I get to like tell him about the stuff that happened the way I would have when he was alive. It's like we have a living, breathing relationship still. I do most of the talking, but I always did.
That's really beautiful. I mean, it really boils down to you and your level of self-awareness and being able to not get in your own way, being able to talk yourself off ledges, being able to be the friend that he was to you and to continue like honoring his legacy and I'm certain living a life that he would want you to be living.
I feel like that. I mean, before he died, I would tell him like, hey, if I die, you should marry my sister. Like, you know, she's beautiful. She's cool. He's like, you're gross. And my sister would say like, she was nicer. She's like, oh, I don't know. My girls are like, Mom, that's disgusting. But Dave never said that he would want me to move on. I think, you know, I can hear him from downstairs saying, no, I don't date. Don't.
Yeah. Oh.
But I tease him about it. Okay. And I ask for his opinion. And like what I choose to believe is spiritual Dave, who has his earthly imperfections, is very happy that I'm dating.
Of course. I love that. That's a great way.
And he's not here to say, no, I don't want you to date.
Given with how in touch you are with your soul, your spirit, do you ever see signs of him out in the world?
I didn't so like, keep in mind, I'm also an accountant. And so like not new to spirituality. I grew up in the church. Maybe that means I am new to spirituality.
Yeah.
I have some deep programming to do
right?
for myself. But, and this is another thing that I think that allowing sort of some lightness around my grieving has given me is now I feel like I do feel super close to him. And I'm not too fussed about saying like, is it him or is it my thoughts of him? But I swear I look at the clock at 11:11 almost every day. Yeah. And I just say, hey, babe, like, how are you doing? Like, so I don't know or really care what that is. It's my current relationship with him. But that's newer. Like when I was really in the trauma, in the thick of it, I didn't feel close to him. I think I couldn't be. I couldn't handle it.
It's too hard. Yeah. Wow. So as you are now, I mean, I feel like you're still just like at the beginning, you know, I mean, a year and a half, like that flies by.
It does.
And it's been so watching you retell this journey and kind of seeing the light in your eyes as you do look forward on this next round of your life. You know, what is it that you allow yourself to hope for?
Just to comment on the whole timeline, I think death, but anything big in our lives, it sort of alters our experience with time, right? It's like when you're on holidays, you remember every day. Like somehow it's quick, but it also like it's slower because you're savoring all this, right? Not that I was savoring grieving, but death is super strange in that in some ways it feels like, and I kind of loathed the passing of time initially because it was like I was moving away from him on the timeline, right? So in some ways I can't even remember the person I was before the last year and a half. I can't feel the person that I was, you know? Oh. I would say, like what is different in me now is that I am more cracked open. I have a bigger capacity for emotion and connection than I had before. I think in part because I think if we're closed off because we're scared of being hurt. And one of the things that this past year and a half has shown me is I have way more resilience than I ever imagined. And so this kind of experience cracks you open even if you don't want it to. Like even if you'd rather be, you're just like literally a walking raw nerve. Like at first I am going to like work my way very slowly to answer your question, but
it's okay.
I couldn't even listen to words. Like it didn't matter what there was no like right thing to say. Sure. Words were like sandpaper on raw flesh for me. Like you're just so open, like you're open to the point where you can't function very well, right? But like what I'm taking forward into my life for the rest of my life, however long it is continuing to be open, because that is fully being alive.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference. I also did, you were talking about your sweat journey, and I did a mushroom journey, similar idea. And I'm going down to Costa Rica in May to do an ayahuasca experience. And this is living this intention of, I am going to do things that keep me open, crack me open further, so that I can experience life fully and I can be fully in it instead of guarded, right? So that's a huge thing. The other, and I mentioned it before, but it's a different way of being too, is this idea of wanting what I get, and faith that it's not that only good things are going to happen to me, but it's that I want everything that's going to happen to me. I don't want to not have any of it. I want to have it all. There's kind of like a peace that comes with that that's hard to describe, because starting on this little dating journey, right? And me, like, my brain saying, I'm going to like think my way to the next right person, right? Or like disappointment if someone's not reciprocating interest or whatever it is. But this idea that of faith in whatever is happening should happen, I don't know, it enables me to just roll a lot easier. So I mean, I have plans. I got big plans. So it's not about, like, I grew up in the church. My grandparents were they weren't just fundamentalists. There was lots of rules. Anyway, they wouldn't have life insurance because they felt like that was like interfering with God's
inviting.
Plan. As a little control freak, I was like, that's dumb. Okay. So I'm not just sitting back and saying, I'm going to allow life to happen. And I have faith that whatever happens is good. Like, I'm out there making plans. Like I'm going to continue creating content. I want to find another life partner. I want to see more of the world and push myself physically. I'm always, pushing for a next like challenge, physical challenge. But mainly I have plans for how I want to be in the world. And watching, like, having a front row seat to Dave dying, and he was a very accomplished person, and work was a big, big part of his life. And he, like, I would say he changed the Canadian landscape when it came to industry, and the relationship between industry and First Nations in the energy sector in Canada.
Okay.
And it's not that none of that matters. It's super important and wonderful. And it's with the people who love you that you live on.
Yeah.
And maybe this is even more so for women, who are maybe more centered on relationship than centered on accomplishment. But I really think, like, for most of us with hindsight on our life, not that we would wish away any of our accomplishments, but we might, if it meant that we sacrificed relationships with the people who we love and who love us. And so, my big plan is to love the shit out of my people and accept their love.
And those are two very different things. And that is amazing, because we as human beings, it's I think it's almost easier to love than it is to accept love.
Amen.
So acknowledging those two as individual entities is really, really awesome.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Nothing like a heavy dose of hardship to force you to accept help.
Right? It is so true. I mean, asking for help, I don't know why that is one of the toughest things.
Yeah, I have a girlfriend who's going through a hard time, and she was having trouble asking for help. And she's a very wise woman. And she said, I guess part of it is I had had to accept the risk that people wouldn't help. If we say we want love, we're going to accept love. What happens if people don't love us?
Yeah.
But you don't get any freaking love unless you're open to to the rejection.
Totally. It's so true. And sometimes the rejection is big and it hurts, but it's like, at least you put yourself out there.
Totally. You at least you had a shot.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't, you never know.
That's right. You literally
what's worse?
Can't get love without the vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Because they're just like, unless you open yourself up, you show yourself, you show your own need. It ain't true love.
Yeah, totally. So how are your girls?
They're amazing. Obviously, this changed the course of their life. I mean, every day changes the course of your life, but this is a cataclysmic change in their life.
Mm-hmm.
We are a super tight unit. Thank God we were already super close. We had this really solid foundation of intimacy and not a lot of like, I know like some moms and teen girls have challenges, but we just never had those challenges.
No, that's great.
We have the challenges in any intimate relationship, but it's a very peaceful, loving connection between the three of us. They are wise and amazing and resilient and suffering. So we're all trying to support one another.
Well, you guys are so lucky to have each other. And I'm
Amen.
so grateful that you have the relationship you do, because I can tell, I can just see it on your face, what they mean to you.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're awesome. Thank you for
So
being here. Thank you for talking with me. Thank you for sharing your story so beautifully and delicately and vulnerably. Is that a word?
Yeah. It was my pleasure, really. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So how can people find you? How can they read your book? How can they get prepared for your next book?
Yeah, so my two earlier books are, well, one is just coming out shortly, but you can find them on really any online platform. But my website is kellylavallie.com. And you can find me on TikTok, every day till I die. No, I'm not going to make that commitment.
Well, I sure enjoy your videos, so I'm grateful that we crossed paths on the interwebs.
So am I.
Yeah. Well, for everybody, thank you. Kelly, thank you. Everybody, thank you as always for listening, for watching, for being here. Please remember to click that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple. It does mean quite a bit to the old algorithm. And we will talk to you guys next week.